She built an empire on control until a janitor's silent takedown shattered everything she thought she knew about strength. The Vertex headquarters stood like a glass monolith in the heart of downtown Seattle, its reflective panels catching the late afternoon light as if the sky itself bowed to the building's cold elegance. Inside, the 15th floor training room was a sanctuary of discipline. Padded floors, minimalist walls, no mirrors, only truth. Madeline Shaw, 35, barefoot in a slate-gray G embroidered with her initials, rolled her neck side to side. Her movements were precise, intentional, measured, like everything else in her life. "Let's begin," she said. The words dropped like pins in the silent room. Around her, a small circle of Vertex's top-level executives and high-performing staff leaned against the walls, coffee in hand, pretending to be casual, but every eye was on her, on the woman who turned a crumbling startup into a $9.2 billion empire before turning 35, who closed 3 international acquisitions in 1 quarter, who moved with the precision of a general and the detachment of a surgeon. Today's team-building session was her idea. An exhibition spar, a lesson in composure under pressure, a demonstration of her most recent personal motto: control isn't given, it's taken. "Jack Benton," she called evenly. There was a pause, a shuffling. And then, a man in his late 40s stepped from the far corner, wearing a faded white guy with no markings, no rank, just the quiet presence of someone used to being unseen. The janitor. Jack's eyes didn't waver. His face was calm but unreadable. He bowed. She nodded back. She had heard from HR that he taught self-defense on weekends at a local community center. Some of the interns liked him, called him Sensei Mop. It amused her. This match was meant to be symbolic. To demonstrate grace under fire, control over ego. She would allow him to get close. She would win with elegance, a message in motion. They met in the center of the mat, the room quieted to breath and heartbeat. "Ready?" she asked. Jack gave no verbal reply, only the subtle tilt of his head. Then it began. A soft circle step. Her foot brushed the mat as she closed the gap. He mirrored her, calm, economical, no bravado, no tension. She feinted left. He didn't bite. She moved again, faster now, aiming for a wrist grip, a classic collar drag. And in that moment, the world tilted. Her balance was gone. Her heel lifted. His hand barely touched her GI. A pivot, a sweep. No slam, no brutality, just a shift, an opening of space. And then, she was on her back. The ceiling blinked at her. Silence. No one clapped. No one laughed. Not even Jack. He didn't loom or gloat. He simply stepped back and bowed, then offered a hand to help her up. Madeline stared at it. Her lungs filled too slowly. Her jaw locked. What just happened? She took his hand and he pulled her up with a strength that didn't humiliate. It was gentle. For the first time in a decade, maybe longer, she had lost. Not in quarterly profits, not in boardroom votes, but here, where there were no numbers to manipulate, no assistants to filter mistakes, just gravity and truth. Her face didn't show it. But inside, something broke. Jack bowed once more and stepped back to the wall, resuming his place as if nothing had happened, like he hadn't just undone the foundation of everything she believed about power. She turned to the audience. "That's it," she said tightly. "Dismissed." As people began to shuffle out, some clearly confused, others awkwardly avoiding her eye, she remained standing on the mat, unmoving. Outside, the sky glowed with the last warmth of day, but inside her, a chill had set in. Not from the loss, but from the silence that followed it. It was the kind of silence that doesn't come from defeat. It comes from seeing yourself clearly for the first time. She didn't know yet, not fully, that Jack Benton was not just a janitor, that he had once taught warriors how to fall and still rise, that behind those quiet eyes was a man who had lost more than his rank and learned more from silence than any boardroom ever could. But the seed was planted, and in that seed, humility, and perhaps, if she let it grow, healing. At precisely 4:30 a.m., Jack Benton unlocked the side door of Vertex headquarters, as he had every morning for the past 6 years. The city of Seattle still slept, wrapped in a gray-blue fog that hadn't yet lifted from the sound. Streetlights cast long reflections on damp concrete. To most, the building was a monument of sleek ambition. To Jack, it was simply his route. One hallway at a time, one trash can, one floor. He wore the same navy blue utility shirt with the small embroidered patch, Vertex Maintenance, stitched just above his heart. The name Jack had long since frayed from daily wear, but no one asked his name anymore. He didn't mind. Silence was easier than pity. In the quiet before the building stirred to life, Jack took a moment to stand still in the janitor's closet. He folded his hands over the handle of the mop, breathing in the scent of lemon cleaner and something faintly metallic. A memory tugged at the edge of his mind, his knuckles tightening, a scream, a man named Ben, and the cold, always the cold. 12 years earlier, Camp Pendleton, California, U.S. Marine Corps Close Combat Training Facility. The sun was relentless that day. High desert light scorched the open-air training pit. A ring of sweat-drenched recruits circled as Staff Sergeant Jack Benton stood in the center, sleeves rolled to the elbow, voice calm but commanding. "Pain is not your enemy," he said. "Panic is." Among the recruits stood a tall, blonde, cocky second lieutenant, Ben Caffrey. The kid had spirit, stupid, beautiful, reckless spirit. He grinned at Jack like they were on a basketball court instead of military training. "You want me to take you down, sir?" Ben teased. Jack didn't smile. "I want you to listen." They squared off. It was supposed to be routine, demonstrate technique, correct posture, show restraint. But Ben went harder than expected. A wild leg sweep. Jack countered. A missed pivot. A shout, the sound of bone against dirt. And then, silence. Ben lay unmoving, his leg twisted, his back arched in shock. Jack's voice dropped an octave. "Medic! Now!" The next hours blurred into chaos. Transport, triage, briefing. The young lieutenant would live, but he wouldn't walk the same. Paralysis from the waist down. Not complete, but permanent. Jack was cleared in the inquiry, officially, but the paper didn't matter. What mattered was that a young man's future had broken in Jack's hands. Ben never blamed him. Jack never forgave himself. Back in the present, Jack stood in the gleaming Vertex lobby and stared at the polished floor beneath his boots. His reflection looked back at him, muted, distorted. A man with no title, no rank, no audience. But above, nestled in the 15th floor of glass and chrome, was the woman whose face he couldn't shake. Madeline Shaw. He'd seen the videos, knew who she was, knew how she moved, efficient, distant, powerful. And yesterday, when she called his name, he had felt something stir, not defiance, not even pride, just stillness. He hadn't meant to unbalance her, Not really. But when her center gave way, when she fell with the grace of someone who'd never learned how to fall, he'd known it wasn't just her body hitting the mat. It was everything she had built around herself. At 7 o'clock a.m., Jack's shift ended early. Every Thursday, he took those precious extra minutes and drove the 10 blocks east toward the school. He parked behind the small brick building, tucking his Vertex badge into his jacket before stepping out. A voice called from the gate. "Daddy!" Lily ran toward him, her strawberry blonde curls bouncing wildly beneath her purple hoodie. She was 9, all elbows and knees and fierce intelligence. In her backpack was a chessboard, a library card, and the scribbled beginnings of her first comic strip. Jack crouched to meet her. "Did you win?" he asked. "Draw?" she grinned. "But I made Devin cry." He chuckled. "That's not the goal, Lily." "I know. But it was fun." She leaned into him for a quick hug, and for a moment the guilt loosened its grip. They walked to the corner diner for their Thursday ritual. 2 eggs, 1 pancake, and 1 question of the day. She asked, "What's the bravest thing you ever did?" Jack didn't speak at first. He stirred his coffee slowly, then answered, "I told the truth when it hurt." She nodded like it made perfect sense. Later that afternoon, back at Vertex, Jack moved through the top-floor hallway in silence. Cleaning staff weren't supposed to linger, but today something drew him to the glass conference room. He paused at the far end. Inside, Madeline stood alone, staring at the large screen on the wall. On it was a paused image of their sparring match. She was mid-fall, frozen in that strange, weightless moment, caught between the illusion of control and the reality of letting go. She hadn't noticed him yet. He could have kept walking. He didn't. Instead, Jack knocked gently on the glass, then nodded once and walked away. She didn't speak. But for the first time in years, she didn't look through someone like he wasn't there. That night, in their small apartment near Beacon Hill, Jack sat by Lily's bed as she read aloud from The Lion, The Witch, and The Wardrobe. Her voice was animated, alive. She'd started reading to him at night after he'd admitted he sometimes missed being read to when he was her age. "And then Lucy said," Lily read, "I wouldn't have gone without you." Jack looked at his daughter and whispered, "I wouldn't either." Control was the only language Madeline Shaw trusted. It was the unspoken code of her morning routine: 4-minute cold shower, black coffee, inbox 0 by 6:15 a.m. It was in the way she walked, never rushing, never drifting. It was etched in the contracts she negotiated, the metrics she tracked, the boardrooms she commanded with surgical calm. But that morning, she stood in front of the mirror in her executive suite, motionless. There was no bruise from the fall, no scar, no witnesses left in the room. Yet something felt fractured. The mirror reflected her usual perfection: immaculately tailored navy blouse, hair pinned back with precise efficiency, not a strand out of place. But she saw it now, what no one else could: the tremor beneath the stillness. Her assistant, Corey, was already outside when she emerged. "Your 7:30 has been moved to 7:45. Mr. Lang from legal pinged twice. You've got a team's debrief on the EU expansion." "Cancel the EU call. Move Lang to 10 o'clock," she said without slowing. Corey blinked but nodded. "Understood." Madeline's heels clicked crisply across the marble hallway, but her thoughts were nowhere near Europe or patent disputes. They were on a janitor, a man with no rank, who never raised his voice, never flexed his weight, and yet had undone her without harm, without ego. Why didn't he finish the move? Why didn't he win? She hated unfinished equations, things that didn't resolve. This wasn't about pride. It was about logic, precision, predictability. Jack Benton didn't fit the equation, and that made him dangerous. She reached her office, corner suite, floor-to-ceiling glass, a view of Puget Sound that would have inspired awe in anyone less occupied with internal storms. With a flick of her fingers, she summoned the company's internal personnel database. Name, Benton, Jack Department, Facilities Services. Start date, June 16, 2019. No bio, no accolades, just shift logs and maintenance notes. Reliable, quiet, zero complaints. But then, she saw it. A redacted block. Military record, classified under DOD clearance. She paused. Her fingers hovered. Override. As CEO, she had clearance to access limited personnel military histories for security consistency. She hesitated, not because it was illegal, but because it felt personal. She typed slowly. Service History Review Request. Benton, Jack. Seconds later, a document unfurled across her screen. Name, Jack A. Benton, Branch, United States Marine Corps. Role, Close Combat Instructor. Deployment, Afghanistan, 2010 to 2012. Fallujah, 2008. Kandahar, 2009. Decorations, Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, X2. Status, honorably discharged. Note, subject involved in high-profile training accident at Camp Pendleton. Non-fatal, resulted in partial paralysis of recruit. Cleared of misconduct. Injured party, Lieutenant Benjamin Caffrey. Her breath stopped. Ben. The name hit like a ricochet bullet. Benjamin Caffrey. The man she had almost married. The man who died overseas 6 months after his spinal injury, still insisting on deploying one final time. Always chasing something more. Glory, forgiveness, maybe just peace. Jack Benton was the man who trained him, the man who blamed himself. Her chair creaked as she slowly leaned back. Suddenly, yesterday's sparring match wasn't a coincidence. It was history circling back in silence. Madeline reached into her bottom drawer and pulled out a box she hadn't opened in years. Inside, under a layer of soft linen, was Ben's old flight pin and a letter she had never been able to finish reading, the one he wrote before his final mission. She unfolded it now with trembling fingers. Maddie, if you're reading this, I probably did something reckless again. I'm sorry, but I need you to know. I forgive Jack. I wish you would too. He didn't break me. He saved me. Even when I hated him, I knew it. He taught me how to fall without fear. You don't know it yet, but one day, maybe you'll need that too. Love. Ben's tears came quickly. Not because of loss, not because of guilt, but because her walls had cracked. And someone from a life long buried had reached through the rubble to say, let go. That evening, she canceled her next 3 meetings. Corey blinked again. Are you feeling okay? No, she replied. Then she walked back down to the janitor's level. No assistants, no cameras, just her. But Jack wasn't there. His cart sat idle in the hallway. The polished floors gleamed. She stood there a full minute, staring at the emptiness, at the echo of someone who had nothing to prove, and yet had changed everything. And for the first time in months, she didn't feel powerful. She felt awake. It was the kind of event that Vertex employees joked about behind closed Slack channels, the kind you dressed up for even if you were working in cybersecurity, the kind of event Madeline Shaw rarely missed and never underdelivered. The quarterly Momentum Summit was held in the company's sleek, sun-drenched auditorium, a space engineered to impress. Minimalist white walls, smart lighting, and a ceiling that opened to the Seattle sky on command. A symbol of openness, innovation, control. This time, though, something felt different. Madeline stood backstage, a wireless mic clipped to her blazer, her voice being tested in her earpiece by an assistant. Her expression was unreadable. To the outside world, she looked poised as always, clean lines, perfect posture, no hint of hesitation. But inside, a storm was moving. She had read Ben's letter again that morning, 3 times, and now she was about to lie in front of 500 people. The presentation started the same as always. Ambient music, the Vertex highlight reel, philanthropic partnerships, new product features, celebrity endorsements. Then the lights dimmed. "And now," announced the head of HR, "a special moment from our last company fitness initiative, what we like to call stillness in motion." The screen flickered to life. There she was, Madeline, poised, confident, squaring off against Jack Benton. Except, this wasn't what had happened. The video had been trimmed, the entire sweep gone, the fall deleted. The moment of silence that followed, cut. In its place, a montage of her rising to her feet, holding her ground, smiling as if the match had gone exactly to plan. The audience clapped. Some chuckled politely. Others looked impressed. And Jack wasn't even named, just our Vertex community member. Madeline stood center stage, microphone live. Her fingers closed tightly around the remote in her hand. She had ordered the video edited. She told herself it was to preserve company morale, that the image of a CEO falling on her back in front of her staff didn't serve leadership optics. That vulnerability had its time and place, and it wasn't during Q3. But as she looked at the crowd, young engineers, product designers, finance interns, she saw something else. She saw trust, and she saw her own hand breaking it. She opened her mouth to speak, but the applause drowned her. And then, something unexpected happened. Across campus, in a quiet engineering bullpen on the 11th floor, a junior intern named Naomi Reyes stared at her screen. She had been one of the few who witnessed the original match. She remembered how the air had shifted, how something real had cracked through the culture of pretense. Her job in the AV team included access to internal media servers. That morning, she'd stumbled across the original footage, before it had been cut. And she couldn't stop watching it. Not because Madeline had fallen, but because of how Jack had extended his hand, how gently he'd pulled her up, how no one had mocked her. How silence had said more than any script ever could. So Naomi, with trembling fingers, uploaded the full video to the Vertex internal portal, marking it alternate perspective, uncut. No headline, no accusation, just the truth. Within 10 minutes, it was already spreading across departments. Within 20, the Slack channels were buzzing. Wait, this is the full version? Jack's the janitor? Yo, this is actually kind of profound. Why wasn't this the one we saw? Naomi didn't care about going viral. She just thought truth deserved oxygen. Back in the auditorium, Madeline stepped off the stage as her speech concluded to a standing ovation. But she didn't smile. Her assistant Corey met her backstage, tablet in hand. "You might want to see this," he said cautiously. He showed her the upload, the view count, the comments. The sudden spike in internal morale, not for the presentation she had just given, but for the moment she had tried to bury. Her heart clenched. For years, she had crafted every public moment like a sculpture, chiseling away flaws, polishing the surface until it gleamed. But this was unvarnished, real. And it was being celebrated more than any keynote she'd ever delivered. That night, Long after the lights of Vertex had dimmed, Madeline sat alone in her office, cross-legged on the floor, the glow of her screen washing over her face. She played the uncut video. She watched herself fall, watched Jack hesitate, then offer his hand, watched her take it, watched herself rise. It wasn't graceful, it wasn't polished, but it was human. And that, it seemed, was what people had been waiting to see. In the maintenance closet on the ground floor, Jack finished coiling a hose and wiping down the mop head. He didn't know the video had been uploaded. He hadn't checked Slack. He wasn't on any portal. He just felt a little lighter, as if something had shifted, as if maybe, for once, the truth had been left untouched. The envelope was pale blue and sealed with a piece of cat-shaped sticker tape. It lay alone on Madeline Shaw's desk that morning, resting atop the quarterly financial reports like it didn't know it didn't belong there. No return address, no company stamp, just her name, Miss Madeline, scrawled in a child's handwriting with a purple glitter pen. Madeline stared at it for a full minute, hands unmoving. Her assistant hadn't seen who left it. It had appeared sometime between 6:45 and 7:10 a.m., and no one remembered a courier. Security footage only showed a small figure with a hoodie and a determined walk, slipping past the front desk with something tucked under their arm. She peeled the sticker gently and unfolded the note. The writing was uneven, certain letters backward, but it was clear enough to read. Dear Ms. Madeline, I saw you make my dad smile yesterday. He doesn't do that a lot since my mom went to heaven. So thank you. I think you're strong, even when you fall. Love, Lily, age 9. P.S. If you ever want to come eat grilled cheese with us, I know how to make the crust not crunchy. Madeline's hands tightened around the paper, and for the first time in over a decade, her eyes blurred. She didn't cry when the merger with Kinetic Tech collapsed. She didn't cry when she signed the papers that removed her from her father's will. She didn't cry at Ben's funeral. But here she was, brought to her knees not by loss or betrayal, but by a child's simple honesty. She read it again, slower this time. There was no agenda in Lily's words, no spin, no performative professionalism, just kindness, the kind that cost nothing but meant everything. And something else, an insight she hadn't seen coming. He doesn't do that a lot since my mom went to heaven. So Jack had lost his wife. That quiet steadiness he carried. It wasn't just dignity. It was grief. Unspoken. Endured. Carried like weight underwater. And still, he smiled. Because of her. Madeline folded the note carefully and placed it in her desk drawer, not buried, but right on top. She slid the drawer shut like someone closing a chapter too delicate to rush. She didn't realize until then how loud the office had become. Phones buzzing, keyboards clacking, the faint rhythm of espresso machines whirring down the hall. But inside her? Stillness. By 10 a.m., she was supposed to be on a call with the Singapore expansion team. Instead, she stood barefoot in the executive fitness room, facing the exact same mat where Jack had unbalanced her days before. She moved slowly, rehearsing the fall. Not the strike, not the win, the fall. How her spine had met the mat, how the silence had rung louder than applause, how Jack hadn't gloated, hadn't laughed, hadn't even stayed to explain, just bowed. That, she realized, was strength, not domination. Presence. Downstairs, Jack was repairing a jammed hand dryer in the women's restroom when his walkie-talkie crackled with a voice he hadn't heard through it before. Jack, this is Madeline Shaw. Do you copy? There was a long pause. He pressed the button. I do. Are you available to come up to the executive gym? I would like to speak with you. No mops needed. Another pause. I'm on my way. When he arrived, Madeline stood in the center of the mat in a black Vertex hoodie, her hair tied back, not in the severe CEO bun, but something softer, looser. She looked human. I got a letter, she said without preamble. From Lily. Jack's brow lifted just slightly. I didn't know she knew who I was, Madeline added. Jack gave the faintest smile. She notices more than people think. She said I made you smile, Madeline continued. You don't do that much anymore. Jack looked away. Kids tell the truth, don't they? Madeline took a step closer. I didn't come here to apologize. Not exactly. He waited. I came to say thank you for not finishing the move, for not humiliating me. Jack shook his head. That wasn't kindness, Madeline. It was clarity. She tilted her head. Clarity? You don't need to lose to feel broken, he said. Sometimes, it's scarier when someone helps you up. The room went quiet. Then, softly, Madeline asked, Would you teach me? His eyes met hers. Teach you what? How to fall, she said, and mean it. That night, in a modest apartment filled with mismatched furniture and laughter, Lily was making grilled cheese while her dad watched from the kitchen table. She was humming. The crusts weren't crunchy. She turned and said, Do you think she'll come, Dad? Jack glanced at the empty chair. I think, he said, for the first time in a long while, someone opened a door inside her. Lily nodded. Good. People need grilled cheese when that happens. The rooftop of Vertex headquarters was normally reserved for board receptions, quarterly product launches, and drone footage that made investors feel like they were buying into the future. But at dawn, it was just wind and concrete. Madeline Shaw stepped onto the gravel path in her running shoes, a travel mug in one hand and a question she hadn't yet figured out how to ask, lodged tightly in her chest. Jack Benton was already there. He stood near the edge, his posture relaxed, both hands in the pockets of his zip-up sweatshirt. Behind him, the Seattle skyline stretched into mist. Below them, the city woke up. Delivery trucks hummed, ferry horns called from the sound, and the smell of roasted coffee drifted up like an offering. Madeline didn't clear her throat, didn't announce her presence. She simply walked until she was standing beside him, exactly 2 feet of space between them. Neither spoke. Then Jack asked, Why here? Madeline sipped her coffee. Because I don't want anyone to hear me fall. Jack turned slightly, a raised brow. I meant, she added, if I'm going to let go of something, I'd rather do it above the noise. He nodded slowly. Lily told me you come up here sometimes, she said. She talks too much, Jack smiled faintly. She gets that from her mom. Madeline offered a small, genuine smile of her own. Smart kid. Jack studied the skyline. So, what did you come to say? There it was. The question had arrived. But Madeline didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out over the horizon and spoke as if she were narrating someone else's life. I was 9 when my father taught me to shoot him. 11 when I beat 3 boys in a pull-up contest. 14 when I broke my first board in Jiu-Jitsu. She paused. I've always been told that being strong meant never showing what hurt. Jack didn't interrupt. So when Ben died, she continued, I compartmentalized, folded the grief into a corner of my brain, and laminated it. She exhaled, and I rose, faster, higher, harder, became the woman they said would never cry on stage, never shake hands unless she controlled the room. Never fall until I did. She turned to Jack now, eyes clear. And you let me fall. You let me hit the truth. Jack's voice was soft. I didn't let you. You were ready. Madeline's throat tightened. I need to learn how to lose, she said, and still look myself in the eye. Jack said nothing for a moment. Then he answered, not with a lecture, but with a story. There was a boy once, he said, fresh into the core, sharp as a blade, cocky as hell. Thought he could dodge fear by outrunning it. Madeline listened without blinking. His instructor, me, watched him fall. Thought I broke him. Carried the guilt like shrapnel. Jack's voice thickened. But that boy forgave me before I ever forgave myself. And when he died, he left a letter that said, falling isn't failure. Staying down is. He turned toward her fully now. You don't want to learn to lose, Madeline. You want to learn to stay. When it's hard. Madeline blinked fast. Then nodded. I want you to train me, she said. Not for show. Not for sparring. Just to stay. Jack looked at her for a long time, then finally said, We start Monday, 6 a.m. I'll call it Combat and Stillness. Is that a real class? It is now. The wind picked up. Madeline closed her eyes for a moment and tilted her face toward it. Do you miss her? She asked softly. Every day, Jack said. But Lily fills the silence. Madeline nodded. I didn't know Ben was yours, she whispered. Jack looked away. I didn't know he was yours either, until I saw your face in the file. I read his last letter, she said. He asked me to forgive you. And did you? I'm trying. Silence settled between them. Not cold, not awkward, just honest. Jack took a step toward the door. But before going in, he said one last thing. Strength isn't about resisting gravity, Madeline. She turned to look at him. It's about rising in its presence. Then he was gone. Madeline remained on the rooftop for a long time, holding her coffee, watching the sunrise spill across glass buildings like gold. She didn't feel victorious. She felt real. And for the first time in years, she wanted to keep going. It was 5:58 a.m. when Madeline Shaw arrived at the training room. She stood outside the double doors of the 15th floor gym, heart pounding in a rhythm she hadn't felt in years. Not fear, not performance anxiety, something deeper. Anticipation without ego. She wore a simple black gi, no initials, no stripes, no armor of rank. For the first time since her early teens, she was a student. Inside, the space had transformed. Gone were the polished mirrors and staged lighting. In their place, soft mats, warm overhead bulbs, and one small, unassuming sign hung above the entrance in Jack's careful block lettering. Combat and Stillness. Strength isn't loud, it's present. Jack stood at the center of the mat in a charcoal gray gi, sleeves rolled up, barefoot like always. She nodded once as she entered. He returned it, no need for pleasantries. Behind her, she was surprised to hear two more footsteps. She turned. Naomi Reyes, the intern, and a quiet older man from accounting she vaguely recognized. Doug, maybe? Doug with the limp. They each gave her a respectful smile. Not the boardroom kind, the real kind. Jack stepped forward. No belts, no hierarchy. No applause, he said. This is a space to fail. Quietly. Often. He looked directly at Madeline. To fall. And stay. And rise. The warm-up was nothing special. Joint rolls, breathwork, slow sequences of movement. But the silence wrapped around them like a kind of ritual. No one spoke unless necessary. Every motion was deliberate. Then came the first exercise. A sweep drill. The same technique Jack had used to unseat Madeline days earlier. Now, it was her turn to learn it. She watched as Jack demonstrated the movement with Naomi. He swept her legs gently, guiding her body to the mat in slow motion, like a father teaching a child how to land in snow. Then it was Madeline's turn. She faced Doug, bent her knees, took a breath, and went in. Wrong angle. She tripped. Landed awkwardly. A grunt escaped her. Doug instinctively reached for her arm, helping her steady. I'm sorry, she muttered. Jack approached, knelt beside her. Did you break? She blinked. No. Then you did it right. And somehow those 5 words felt more affirming than any trophy, any bonus, any headline she'd ever earned. Over the next hour, they repeated the movement again and again. Sweep. Fall. Breathe. It was maddening at first. Her body resisted the grace of surrender. Her muscles clenched with remembered control. But by the 8th repetition, something shifted. She didn't brace. She flowed. Her back met the mat with a soft thud, and this time she smiled. Later that week, more employees joined. An HR rep, a systems architect, even a skeptical executive VP who hadn't spoken to Jack in 6 years. No rank, no mirrors, just bodies learning how to land without shame. After the session, Madeline stayed back to help roll up the mats. Her hair clung to her neck. Her GI was damp. She didn't care. As Jack packed away the practice pads, she asked, "Why this? Why call it combat and stillness?" He considered before replying. "Because that's life," he said. "We fight what's loud, but we survive by learning how to sit with the quiet." She sat on the mat, elbows on knees. "I spent so much time building a fortress around myself," she admitted. "Success became the moat. Titles became the gate." "And now?" Jack asked. She looked up. "Now? I just want to feel the ground and know I'm still here." Jack didn't say anything. He simply nodded and tossed her a towel. That evening, Lily waited by the window with 2 mugs of cocoa and a grilled cheese cooling on a plate. "Did she fall today?" she asked as Jack walked in. He smiled. 3 times. And she laughed. Lily beamed. "That's how you know it's working." Jack ruffled her hair. "You're wise for 9. "I get that from Mom," she said, matter of fact. He looked at her, quiet, then whispered, "Yeah, you do." Back at her penthouse, Madeline entered her apartment and dropped her bag by the door. For once, she didn't check her inbox. She didn't pour a drink. She didn't turn on the news. Instead, she walked barefoot onto her balcony, leaned on the railing, and looked out over the city, not as a ruler, but as a person learning how to belong to the world again. Her shoulders relaxed, and somewhere, deep in her chest, she felt something open that had long been locked. Not victory, not power, just peace. The subject line read, "I wasn't sure whether to send this until now." At first glance, it looked like spam. The sender was unfamiliar, Margaret Caffrey, but the name jolted Madeline like a hand brushing an old bruise. Caffrey. Ben's mother. Her index finger hovered over the trackpad. For a long time, she didn't click. She was sitting at her kitchen table, still in her training gi, hair damp from an early morning shower. Her muscles ached in places she hadn't felt in years, but it wasn't pain that made her chest tight. It was the weight of something unfinished. Finally, she opened the email. Dear Madeline, I hope this reaches you well. I hesitated to write for a long time, but someone forwarded me a video from inside your company, a sparring match. I recognized the man immediately. Jack Benton. I'm not sure what your connection to him is, but I felt compelled to reach out. Ben spoke of Jack in his last days, more than once, and I've long suspected you never knew everything. So I'm sending you something. It's a photo I've kept tucked away for over a decade. I found it in Ben's belongings with a note he never sent. Perhaps it's time you saw the full story. With love, Margaret attached was a single image. Madeline clicked. It loaded slowly. 3 figures frozen in time. Ben, grinning in full combat gear. One arm slung around the shoulder of a man Madeline had only recently come to understand. Jack, younger, face hardened by duty, but softened at the edges by something quiet. Respect, perhaps. Between them stood her younger self in a navy hoodie, laughing. It was from the training camp at Pendleton. A day she had almost erased from memory. On the back of the photo, scrawled in Ben's distinct all-caps handwriting, were 6 words. He saved me. She saved him. Madeline's throat closed. Her fingers curled over her mouth as she stared at that moment, 3 lives intersecting before fate tore them apart. She hadn't remembered that day being so bright. She hadn't known Ben saw Jack that way. She hadn't known Ben saw her that way. She scrolled down and saw a second attachment. It was a scanned letter, dated 1 week before Ben's final deployment. The handwriting was uneven, slightly shaky. Jack, you'll never call yourself a hero, but you were mine. I never told you that night, but the reason I signed up for that mission wasn't guilt. It was gratitude. You saved me twice. First, when you pulled me from that blast, and second, when you didn't stop me from going back. You let me make my own ending. Tell Madeline, I never blamed either of you. She taught me what it means to fight. You taught me what it means to live. Madeline couldn't breathe. This was the letter Margaret had found but never sent. Now, here it was, opening a door she'd locked, boarded up, and buried under years of corporate armor. She folded over the laptop screen slowly and pressed her forehead to the edge of the table. The silence of the apartment swallowed her. Hours later, she walked quietly into the maintenance wing. Jack was finishing repairs on an elevator sensor. His sleeves were rolled. His hands were calloused. His head was bowed in concentration. She waited until he looked up. I got an email, she said. His face didn't change, but she saw the flicker of recognition. From Margaret, she added. Still, he said nothing. She sent a photo of you and Ben and me. He nodded once. She knew? Madeline asked. Jack sighed. Mothers know. I didn't, Madeline said. Her voice cracked. I didn't know you were the one who pulled him from that blast. I didn't do enough, Jack replied. You gave him more time, she said softly. Long enough to write those words. She held up her phone. I read them. He said you were his hero. Jack shook his head. I wasn't. You still don't believe that, do you? I believe in people having the right to their own stories. Madeline swallowed. Then maybe it's time we stop editing them. They stood in silence. This time, not uncomfortable, but whole. Later that evening, Jack placed a new photograph on the small table by Lily's bed. It was a reprint of the old one, Ben, Jack, Madeline, now in a simple wooden frame. Lily looked at it with wide eyes. "Was this before Mom?" she asked. "Long before," Jack said. She studied it. "You look the same." Jack laughed. "I had fewer wrinkles. But your eyes are the same." Jack ruffled her hair. "That's the part I keep." Back in her apartment, Madeline lit a candle Ben had given her in their final Christmas together. She read his note again. She pressed the photo frame against her chest. And she whispered into the dark, "Thank you." Mount Rainier rose in the distance like a sleeping giant, its snow-dusted peak glowing beneath the late morning sun. Pine-scented air moved through the evergreens, brushing gently against the trail where 3 figures walked side by side. Madeline Shaw had not worn hiking boots in nearly a decade. Yet here she was, navigating the muddy trail behind Jack Benton and his daughter Lily, one backpack strap digging into her shoulder and the other carrying something else. Silence that felt alive. Not the cold, corporate kind. This was silence born of presence, of shared breath, of choosing to walk, not to arrive, but to be. They hadn't said much on the drive from Seattle. Jack had packed the car with trail mix, water, and an old thermos that rattled with every turn. Lily had worn a pink windbreaker and brought her sketchbook. Madeline, well, she had offered to drive, but Jack had smiled and said, "Let someone else steer today." Now, a few miles into the hike, Madeline could feel the burn in her thighs and the unfamiliar ache in her calves, but it felt real, earned. Lily skipped ahead, her arms out like airplane wings. Jack kept an easy pace beside her, hands in his jacket pockets. "Why here?" Madeline asked after a while. Jack glanced toward the towering trees. "Because this is where things stop talking over you." She nodded. "I think I forgot what that sounds like." "Most people do," he said gently. "Noise becomes comfort. Silence becomes a threat." She took that in, then asked, "Did Ben ever come here?" Jack nodded. "Once. Right before his last tour. We camped overnight and never said the word war once. Just talked about stars, fire, what it meant to matter." Madeline swallowed. "Did you know he was going back?" Jack exhaled. "I knew he needed to." They paused by a wooden signpost. Lily pointed to a side path. "Can we take the long trail?" Jack looked at Madeline. Her hair stuck to her temple. She was slightly out of breath, but she said, "Let's do it." The side trail narrowed. Soon they were walking single file, Jack in front, then Madeline, then Lily, who kept stopping to sketch squirrels and oddly shaped rocks. At one bend, they reached a clearing that opened to a wide vista, Rainier's slopes descending into a blue haze of trees and shadow. They sat. Madeline pulled out the thermos and took a sip of Jack's coffee, strong, slightly burnt, but honest. She passed it to Lily, who sniffed it and made a face. "I'll stick to water," Lily declared. They laughed. It wasn't loud, but it was real. After a moment, Jack pulled out a small notebook from his jacket and handed it to Lily. "Want to write today's thought?" Lily grinned. "Yes." She scribbled quickly, tongue poking out in concentration. When she was done, she read aloud, "You don't need to be strong all the time. You just need to be kind when it matters." Lily Benton, age 9. Madeline looked at Jack. "That's her?" she asked. Jack nodded. "Every trail we take, she writes a truth. Madeline blinked. That's better than anything I've said in a boardroom. Probably. Jack smiled. They watched Lily run toward a patch of moss and kneel to draw a flower. Then, out of nowhere, Madeline whispered, "Do you think I can be different?" Jack didn't ask what she meant. He just said, "You already are." As they descended, Madeline walked beside Lily. The girl was humming now, spinning a pine needle between her fingers. "Ms. Madeline," she said. "Hmm? You walk like you're in charge." Madeline laughed. "Is that bad?" "No," Lily said. "It just means people think you know where you're going." Madeline considered that. "What if I don't?" Lily shrugged. "Then walk slower. Let people catch up." That sentence hit deeper than she expected. She looked ahead, at Jack's steady gait, then behind, at the trail they had taken. And she thought, I don't need to lead today. I just need to stay. By the time they reached the parking lot, Madeline's legs ached, her shoes were caked in mud, and her heart felt strangely unburdened. Jack opened the trunk and tossed in their packs. Before climbing in, Lily handed Madeline a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" Madeline asked. Lily beamed. "It's for your fridge, or your soul." She opened it. A simple drawing. 3 stick figures. 1 tall man, 1 tall woman with wild brown hair, and 1 little girl holding their hands. They were standing under a tree, smiling. Above them, a handwritten title in crayon. The Day the CEO Took the Long Trail. Madeline folded it gently and held it close to her chest. That night, back in her apartment, she placed the drawing on her fridge with a magnet shaped like a pine cone. Then she turned off her phone, sat on the floor, and let the stillness speak. Not to be obeyed, not to be controlled, just heard. 2 months later, the 15th floor training room at Vertex looked nothing like it once had. The glossy branding had been removed, mirrors covered. The long wall now bore a single hand-painted sentence in deep gray lettering. You don't need to win to be strong. You just need to stay when it's hard. The room was no longer exclusive to executives. Now, every Thursday and Saturday, veterans, interns, janitors, programmers, and even the occasional board member came barefoot to move, fall, breathe, and rise. And at the center of it all was Jack Benton, no longer invisible. And beside him, sometimes on the mat, sometimes observing quietly, was Madeline Shaw, no longer untouchable. She had stepped down from her role as CEO 3 weeks earlier. There was no scandal, no press conference, just an internal memo. True leadership isn't about being first. It's about making room. I've spent years building Vertex into a fortress. Now I want to help it become a home. MS. In her place, the new co-CEO structure included 2 leaders. Corey, her longtime assistant now elevated with full authority, and Naomi Reyes, the intern who once uploaded an uncut video that started it all. The company's culture shifted. Performance reviews now included community engagement. The new training budget included martial arts and trauma-informed meditation. The formerly sterile cafeteria offered Family Table Fridays, where employees could sit with strangers and talk. Not about metrics, but meaning. And every week, Jack's combat and stillness class welcomed new faces, people learning how to fall in ways they had never dared in the workplace. On the first day of the new quarter, Madeline arrived early to the community center, an open-concept gym just south of Rainier Valley, renovated through a joint fund between Vertex and the city. It was filled with sunlight, mats, and laughter. Jack was helping a new student, a Marine vet in her 50s, learn how to fall without bracing. Lily was drawing a mural on the side wall, swirling figures in motion, each mid-fall but smiling. Madeline stood in the doorway, watching, then stepped onto the mat. Jack saw her, bowed slightly. She bowed back. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded. "I brought something." From her bag, she pulled a rolled canvas. Together, they unwrapped it. It was Lily's drawing from the mountain trail, but expanded. Now it showed dozens of stick figures on a giant mat, some falling, some helping each other up, all smiling. In the center, one figure sweeping another gently, not to dominate but to teach, and above it in Lily's handwriting, "We fall together. We rise together." Jack smiled and nodded toward the far wall. "Let's hang it there." They mounted it near the entrance, where every new student would pass it. Lily clapped. "Looks like a real dojo now." Madeline laughed. "A very messy kind one." As people filtered in, one of the interns, a quiet, soft-spoken guy named Eli, stood awkwardly at the edge of the mat. Madeline walked up to him. "You're safe here," she said. He looked down. "What if I'm not strong?" "You're here, aren't you?" He nodded slowly. "Then you're stronger than you think." She held out her hand. He took it. Together, they stepped onto the mat. Later that afternoon, Jack found Madeline sitting alone by the window, watching Lily teach a girl how to breathe through fear. "She's good," he said. "She's everything I never knew I needed," Madeline whispered. Jack sat beside her. "You still think the mat is about combat?" he asked. Madeline shook her head. "No. It's about coming home." Outside, the city buzzed on. Horns, laughter, chaos. But inside that small gym, beneath the words on the wall, barefoot and unguarded, people continued to fall and rise and breathe. Not for victory, but for healing. Thank you for staying with us until the end of the story. If you believe that kindness, compassion, and healing still have a place in this world, you're not alone. Hit subscribe to join us for more heartwarming stories. Together, we'll keep writing gentle endings, one breath at a time.